Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. For much of this year we've been reflecting on the subject of the soul. If somebody were to ask you, how is your soul? What are your first thoughts? What comes to mind? Is it some ethereal substance lodged in your body? Some specter associated with yourself? Is the soul a thing, or is it yourself, your true identity? And what does it have to do with so-called eternal life? Let's look at our own experience. Much of the time, what we mistake to be ourselves is our thinking. We not only think, but we think too much about ourselves, which sometimes leads to quite a muddle. We each have an idea of who we are, and we think within the framework of this idea of ourselves. We also have characteristic behaviors and personality features that we take to be ourselves, as well as a body that is our ultimate reference point. But when we speak of soul, we mean something more essential than either our thinking or the body. If we have looked deeply enough inside our own experience, we may, for instance, have experienced ourselves as simple, unqualified presence, a state behind our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. We can recognize that each of us has an inner being, and the quality of this inner being has something to do with our quality of life. Words like conscience, contentment, anxiety, regret, yearning apply to this inner being. It may be that we give more attention to our outer material conditions than to the real needs of our inner being. As I'm sure you know, there have been people who have made the work of inner being their primary focus. Humanity remembers such people more than the glories of conquerors and kings, more than the attainments of the rich and the powerful. These inner explorers and spiritual heroes have sometimes left records and maps, insights, and spiritual practices that relate to the care and development of the soul. In the Sufi tradition, we understand the human being to be composed of three aspects: self, heart, and spirit. This description is derived not from philosophical ruminations, but from centuries of experience and practice. Self is our personal identity, including our thoughts and emotions. It's our emissary to the world. Heart is something deeper, experienced through an inner knowing. It's an ocean of qualities such as compassion, conscience, love. Heart can ultimately lead to the recognition of the deepest part of ourselves, our diamond-like inmost consciousness, spirit, the reflection of God within us. We can say that the soul is our inner being. The quality of our inner being, or soul, is the result of the relationship between self and our inmost consciousness, spirit. The self without the presence of spirit is merely ego, a false mask, which is governed by self-centered thoughts and emotions. The more the self becomes infused with spirit, the more soulful it becomes. When a human being attains a conscious connection between self and spirit, their quality of being is magnified. The more we live mindfully with presence, the more we remember God, the more we have that connection, and the more soulful we are, the more we drop the mask. Care of the soul, then, is always the cultivation of presence and remembrance. Presence includes all the ways we mindfully attend to our lives. Soul is the child of the union of self and spirit. When this union has matured, the soul acquires substance and structure. That's why it's said in some teachings that we don't automatically have a soul. We must acquire one through our spiritual work. You could say the soul is a work of art and a lifelong project. Remember, your inner being, your soul, is a work in progress. So what takes us away from presence and remembrance? This is what we must observe in ourselves. For different types of people have different ways of abandoning their souls. Most of us set out and trade our souls every day for a trivial price, giving our attention away to superficial attractions and trivial entertainments. We also abandon the soul whenever we favor and indulge the ego. A big ego is not the same as a strong soul. The ego self is continually reacting to circumstances and conditions. It has little real will, little presence, intentionality, little moral compass. The ego has little viability because it's more of an effect than a cause. It may have the strength of self-interest, but that same self-interest makes it vulnerable to a million disappointments and threats. What are the signs of a weak soul? If we're dominated by the attractions of the world, bouncing among likes and dislikes, shifting from one subpersonality to another, from one intention to another, changing our minds constantly, living without a center, these are signs that our soul needs more substance. And what are the signs that someone has begun to acquire a soul? More constancy in presence, more intentionality, and more remembrance in outer life. The spiritual teacher is very familiar with the ploys of the ego self, how it interferes with people's spiritual intentions, how it distracts them, subverts them. That's why, especially in the beginning, it's so important to be intentional in relation to one's spiritual commitments. Without giving priority to such commitments, there's little chance of transforming the false self and developing soul. Eventually, as the soul develops, it will show this constancy, even in our dreams, that is, even to the depths of the subconscious mind. The soul is a knowing substance. It knows the reality beyond time and space. To acquire this kind of knowing is to become illuminated, to be connected to a greater intelligence that will guide every step of your life. Instead of living in fear and uncertainty, you will more and more be able to trust the unfolding of life. To experience soul, bring your attention to the breath, the key to the soul. Leave behind all your worries, attractions, and preoccupations. Bring yourself, your conscious attention, to the point where your self encounters spirit. At this point of encounter, you may sense a spiritual reality outside of time. It may help to repeat a name of the divine that is beloved to you. Learn to simply be with this. Learn to love this. As Mevlana Rumi says, O head, you are cause within cause within cause. O body, you are wonder within wonder within wonder. O heart, you are searching within searching within searching. O soul, you are joy within joy within joy. The work of the soul is the greatest satisfaction in life. It is a long, beautiful, sometimes dusty journey with many stages of realization. If you want to know how close you are to living the life of the soul, simply ask yourself, how much of my life energy is devoted to complaining about my circumstances, blaming others for my own unhappiness, promoting myself, deceiving others to make myself look good, or controlling others to achieve my desires? The remedy for all these spiritual diseases is the same: contact with our true inner being that is a reflection of the divine. We must learn to view our attachments and priorities through this higher perspective. After all is said and done, after all our spiritual practices and all the esoteric knowledge that might be acquired, the real measure of soulfulness is simply this: the degree of our humbleness, gratitude, love, and patience. Remember, your character is your art project. You are a work in progress.